Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Today's the Day Changemakers podcast. I am Jody Grunwald. This week, my guest is Dennis Miller, founder and chairman of DCM Associates, Inc. Dennis is a nationally recognized expert in nonprofit executive search, as well as board and leadership performance coaching. Dennis is the former president and CEO of Somerset Medical Center and Foundation. His reputation as a respected healthcare executive resulted in numerous honors. Dennis has a passion for helping the not-for-profit sector. In his words, not-for-profit organizations are the glue that keeps the community going. An expert in board governance, leadership development, philanthropy, and succession planning, he is a sought-after motivational speaker and retreat facilitator. Dennis grew up in Jersey City, New Jersey, and although he shares he had a lot of fun as a child, he also talks about the trauma he experienced. His dad was both emotionally and physically abusive. Because of struggling in school academically and being the class clown, his teachers and parents would tell him that he was a failure. Using humor was a coping mechanism for him. At 20 years old, Dennis admitted himself to a psychiatric hospital due to feeling depressed and in need of support. A priest became a source of support and encouragement when Dennis left the facility. He finally had someone that believed in him. With his incredible spirit intact and the motivation to create a life he would be proud of, he went to college and started taking steps towards his incredible career path. Dennis is also the author of Moppin Floors to CEO, From Hopelessness and Failure to Happiness and Success. To learn more about DCM Associates, Inc. and Dennis, go to DennisCMiller.com. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Today's the Day Changemakers YouTube channel, stream this podcast on all streaming sites, comment, like, and share, and follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Today is the Day Live It. The views expressed by all Today is the Day Changemakers podcast guests are their own. Their appearance on the Today is the Day Changemakers podcast does not imply any endorsement of them or any entity that they represent. Have a great week, everyone. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Today's the Day Changemakers podcast. I am Jody Grunwald, and as I say every single week, I get to interview the most incredible humans who are doing an unbelievable work in their corner of the world and beyond. And today I have Dennis Miller with me. Hi, Dennis. How are you?
Jody, I'm doing wonderful. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Looking forward to it.
I'm good. I'm so happy to have you here with me too. We've known each other for a bit, and it's so nice to finally have you on to share more about yourself. And I'm going to read a little bit about your bio, and then we're going to get into a conversation. Sound good?
Absolutely. I'm all open. Go for it.
Awesome. So Dennis C. Miller is the founder and chairman of DCM Associates, Inc., a nationally recognized expert in nonprofit leadership, executive search, and board and leadership performance coaching, with more than 35 years of experience working with nonprofit board leadership and chief executives across the country. He is a member of the Network of Nonprofit Search Consultants, a professional organization comprised of some of the leading nonprofit search consultants in the United States. He is an expert in board governance, leadership development, philanthropy, and succession planning. He is a sought-after motivational speaker, retreat facilitator, and leadership performance coach. Dennis, you've got a lot of stuff going on in your bio here.
It must have been written by my wife or something. I don't know about that. That doesn't sound familiar to me, Jody, you know.
I think there's a lot more in here too that, a lot more that I didn't share. There are a couple other paragraphs I didn't share, but because I want us to have this conversation. There's a lot that's gone on to get you to where you are today. Didn't just happen that way. So before we get to all of that, I do want to ask you my typical question, my opening question, which is always, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Jersey City, New Jersey, Hudson County. And it was one time when, your aunts and uncles lived next door and your grandparents lived around the corner. And I spent the first 7 years of my life there. And it was a very fun experience growing up there. I eventually moved to a town called Carteret, which is in Middlesex County, New Jersey. And back then, people thought I moved to the country. And I don't think anybody would think Carteret's a country, but it was, it was a big transition going from Jersey City to Carteret. And as everybody knows on the East Coast, what exit are you on? It was exit 12. And I spent a lot of, obviously, my growing years there until I eventually went to grad school and moved out.
as a kid growing up, because you're very forward facing, right? You're out and about consistently now, but as a kid, were you like that as well, or were you more of a shyer child?
I don't shy. I had, I documented quite a bit. I was a friendly guy. I certainly, had, I didn't realize it until years later, I suffered a lot of emotional trauma as a child and at the hands of my dad, who was a very, very talented man, but had, I learned later on, severe personality disorder, gender identity issues, and really emotional problems. And so, it was, I mean, my mother would say, you have to get out of the backyard, boys. Your father's coming home. He doesn't want you playing on the grass. And most parents want you playing on the grass versus the street. So it was a good time, but I was a social guy. And I really kind of, was a funny guy. But I think my humor was really masking the abuse and the trauma that I was experiencing.
I know that you've openly shared some of that in your book called Mopping Floors to CEO, which we'll talk about as well. And that is really tough, because you don't realize it while it's happening, that you don't know that the trauma is going to come with you throughout your life, and how you'll handle it, how it will manifest itself, and how you'll get through it. So, you shared with us that get off the grass because dad's coming home. How do you feel as you were growing up that really played a huge role in your life before you realized that it was something you had to work through?
Yeah, well, when you're a kid, you don't realize what you are. You just think that's the way it is here. I do remember a friend saying he was going on vacation with his parents, and I remember feeling sorry for him. I said, "Oh, you're going away with your parents? I feel like you're going to get beat." Listen, I had a lot of, there was a lot of fun times in my childhood, but I certainly, played sports and had a lot of friends. We played in the street, stickball and box ball and baseball and football, and, go past the Buick and come on back before the Buick and catch the pass kind of thing. And Little League. And, when I went to Carteret, it was like Little League teams on the field with real uniforms. It was a lot of fun here. Just that I had certainly difficulty academically in school, focusing and attention and things like that. So it was a challenge. And by the time I got to high school, even though I was a varsity football player, had the lead in the play, I was a social butterfly, I was a class clown, I was, all those kind of things here. But my academics were very poor, and I struggled academically.
Yeah, so that's hard. But you went on from school, from high school to head where?
Well, when I came out of high school, believe it or not, I got rejected by every college I applied to. My grades were very poor. I was on probably the bottom ranked in my class here. So I did go to county college. I went to Middlesex County College because that was you had to go to county college, you could, and that was a great experience for me. It was during the Vietnam War. People recall it was very turmoil going on in the country here. I did finish county college. I got into a couple four-year schools, and I just was kind of really mixed up, Jody, emotionally, kind of where to go in my life. And by the time I was 20, I just became really distraught, anxious, depressed. I felt despondent. I just didn't really have any parenting. My dad kind of hid in his room. My mom, who was a wonderful person, but she was also kind of abused and depressed and withdrawn because of the abuse of my dad. So my mom kind of was, even though she was a caring person, she was kind of, in many ways I experienced her as kind of cold and rejecting. And so I kind of grew up alone. And eventually, by the time I was 20, I self-admitted myself to a private psychiatric hospital just to get help. And that's where my life changed, because the priest from my parents named Father Gantley came to visit me, and I was 20 years old at the time. And I remember thinking to myself, oh my God, this guy has such a calm demeanor. And I wasn't used to men with calm demeanors, Jody. And I do remember he said, well, Dennis, come see me when you get out. And I'm like, sure, Father, like in a hole in the head. I'm not gonna see you, Father, And then one day I went to a therapy session in New York, and I became more distraught. And I went to the rectory and rang the doorbell. And I cried my eyes out. And the first time I trusted someone to respect and just opened up to someone. And first time I told them how bad my life was. And that was a big pivotal point, big turning point to feel that I had a connection, I had a relationship. And And he helped me for 6 months, just kind of get through a tough day to eventually got me into a day hospital program, and it changed my life.
What's so incredible, Dennis, is that you knew that something was wrong, right? You were really in it, in that you were accepting of the fact that you needed help, and not a lot of people know where to go and what to do. If there is someone right now listening to this podcast that doesn't have that answer, what advice would you give them?
It's got to be a couple of things, Jody. Anybody listening, I would say reach out to anybody, a friend, a neighbor, a colleague at work. Reach out to someone, and just in case. I never told anybody. I kept the secret of my entire life. Actually, I kept the secret until I was 65 years old, because I didn't ever tell a friend or colleague about my life story until I wrote my book, Moppin was the CEO. I would say reach out to just anybody in the family, and just because you need a connection. You can't be on an island. It's just too brutal. And for me, trying to grow up and trying to figure out how do you get to be 40, I really didn't even know. And I just was so alone, so anxious, and just didn't know how to cope, that I went for help, but I was at the bottom of the barrel. There wasn't many places for me to go. It wasn't, so I'm glad I did, but it was a tough spot. But certainly, I bounced back pretty well.
Yes, you did. You surely did. And I know that there's shame, right? So that's why you say 65 is when you finally shared it. What do you think that shame was about?
Yeah, I can tell you what it was about. It was amazing that I felt ashamed that I needed help. I was so embarrassed, Jody, that I needed professional help. I needed a therapist. I never forget this one. I remember being in therapy and saying to myself, okay, fine, but when is this going to end? And one day, here I am, president of a major medical center in New Jersey, going through psychoanalysis to kind of continue to deal with growth in my emotional life. My therapist said to me, Dennis, I'm in my 50s. He said, Dennis, it's okay to need me. And I went like, it is? He said, yeah. He goes, you never had any parents. You never had any parenting. And I felt, Jody, so ashamed that I didn't want anybody to know that here I am, an adult with, successful job titles and blah, blah, blah. But I really was like a child, emotionally really needing help and comfort. And he said, Dennis, it's okay to need me. And I said, it is? He goes, yes. And I began to accept myself, that it was okay. And it was a big opening. And I do remember this one day, we went on vacation. We used to go to Aruba. I love Aruba. And we used to have a timeshare down there after years. And I remember being on the beach and, but preparing to be on the vacation and enjoy myself. And I was like miserable. And I called my analyst and he said to me, Dennis, it's okay. He said, children who don't have a relationship with their parents, identify with them. You identify your mother who was unhappy, but that's your way of loving her. Being unhappy is your way of loving her. So she doesn't feel alone. Your mother's not going to be hurt, Dennis, by you being happy. It was like, it's okay to be happy. He goes, yeah. I said, yay. And so it was like all these little things that I learned to do. And I was like, it's okay. I'm not going to hurt my mom. And I realized, in spite of my big size and sometimes my big mouth, I'm a very caring guy. And it was what I do in my work here. And it really, my upbringing had a big bearing on my life. And it is a result of what I do now, giving back and helping people. But it was very difficult. And I just was embarrassed. I didn't want anybody to know I needed help. I didn't know any. And then I realized after a while, I said, you know what, I'm going to tell my story, Jody, because I think we all need help. And it's sometimes more than others. But I realized there's so many people currently going through a difficult time or went through a difficult time, don't know how to get past it. That I wanted to inspire people that regardless of how difficult their life is or has been, you can change your life. And that's what I'm very fortunate I was able to do it. And so I'm happy.
One of the things with the podcast that I've really wanted and has been a message for me is that if we would stop judging others, then we could share our vulnerability. And when we share our vulnerability is what makes us feel connected and supported instead of ashamed and different.
Yeah, and you know what's amazing? I never forget when I wrote the book, or a book came out, and I always joke, I said, Mrs. Fritz, my seventh grade English teacher, knew I wrote two sentences together correctly, she'd have a heart attack. If she knew that I wrote, 5 books, she'd have a heart attack. But when I wrote the book, Moppin Floors, I've had people all over the country that knew me or called me and tell me about their story. And it was like, it allowed them to open up. And I mean, it was, and, all people of all levels of life just was, and I just felt it was cathartic. I wanted to write my story. I wanted to tell a story to help others. And now I tell everybody. So once I told the book, it's I tell everybody. But it was a tough journey. Yeah.
It's called Mopping Floors to CEO, an autobiography from hopelessness and failure to happiness and success. Where can people find that book?
Well, you can go as on any online bookstore, Barnes and Noble, Amazon. My publisher, Book Locker. It's available, and either hardcover, softcover, and there's whatever it is with Barnes and Noble has the ebook, and Book Locker has the ebook, and I'm not sure why Amazon doesn't have the Kindle version, but it's available all over the place.
That's great. That's great. Thank you for sharing that. So now I want to go back for one more second and just ask you, did you have something in your mind? Actually, I know you were going through a lot, what you wanted to be when you grew up?
You didn't be surprised. Yeah. So in my high school yearbook, it said Dennis will coach a college football team to the Rose Bowl. I thought I viewed myself as I was going to coach football. And I actually, in our high school, we had what they call a powder puff game where the girls played each other. And it was flag football. And I was the coach with my friend, Johnny Konjerski, Dr. Johnny K. And I had a ball with it. So yeah, I saw myself as a football coach. I was looked at by a bunch of colleges as a football player, but and then once I saw my transcripts and my grades, I think they looked for some other players here. But I was my dream. I was going to college football. I was going to be a coach, football coach. Yeah, amazing.
What was the real first paying job then?
Oh, I had a lot of jobs. I had a job. One of my first paying jobs was actually at it was like the A&P. I was a stock boy. I had a job at the luncheonette, of course, from the high school. But I had a job, and it was funny. I had a job. It's called the Dog House, but it was sold hot dogs. It said 10 different hot dogs, and it was right off the exit by the turnpike. But it was like one hot dog, but like, with chili was the Mexican, with kraut it was the German hot dog, with the relish was something else here. It was like one hot dog, but I always worked. I was always a hustler, selling, greeting cards and things like that. But I always had, always had jobs, always a hustle, always working.
That's really interesting because depression and the things that you were talking about a lot of times can hold people back from getting off the couch and doing the things that you were doing. Do you know, was it driving you because that way you would get out of the house, or was there another reason?
No, I think I needed to work to have some money here. And, back then, when the depression got worse, obviously I went to professional up in the hospital here. And then I suffered I literally used to, for 6 months after I came out of the hospital, I would ring the doorbell of the directory to see Father Gantley or throw pebbles out the window or sit in front of the church, and I had to wait till he came back because I had no way to go through. And eventually he got me into this day hospital program in Perth Amboy called the Raritan Bay Mental Health Center. And it was the first time. I was 21. It was the summer of 71. I remember first time in my life I felt I was with a group. I felt cared for. I had structure, a place to go every day. And I never forget, as I was sort of beginning some emotional healing, I developed a amazing appetite, a voracious appetite is what I wanted to read and to learn. So this was all pre-Kindle, my days. I went to the public library and devour books, 6 or 7 at a time, Jody, on the great men and women of the world, religion, philosophy, education, events, just everything. I just devoured it and then realized, wow, the world is so much bigger and broader and wider than I thought it was. when I said, geez, I want to do something, have an impact in my life. That's kind of was the motive between my becoming what I became.
So was there a book that stood out amongst the rest while you were going through that?
Absolutely. Never forget it, called The Art of Loving by Erich Fromm. Now, Erich Fromm was a German psychoanalyst, and it was an amazing book called The Art of Loving. And one of the things I really learned was that, as you know, the time, in the Bible says, love thy neighbor as thyself. But before you can love your neighbor, you have to be able to love yourself and respect yourself. It's synonymous here. And I really was not loving myself. I wasn't accepting myself. I kind of, in many ways, just felt so rejected as a kid that I didn't. And so I had to begin to accept myself. And I accepted myself every time I learned something about myself and said, okay, I understand now why I did that, or how I talked about that, or why I did this, why I understood it. And so once I began to accept myself, that allowed me to be loving and allowed me to love other people. And it dramatically changed my life and how I was able to have relationships with people. And at the end of the day, relationships is what life's about. And that changed my life tremendously. That was a big, big factor. There's a lot of other life lessons I've learned I'm happy to share about, but that was one of them that was really important.
Yeah, I really believe connection is truly everything. Everything I do is related to that, connecting to ourselves, connecting to others. And when you have a disconnect with a family member, parent who you trust, that really does lay the basis and foundation. So you have to rebuild that with yourself, like that connection, and build it from the beginning.
Yeah, if you don't love yourself, you can't love your neighbor. You can't hate yourself, and I did. I was very, I felt tremendously rejected by my parents and certainly my dad. I have two wonderful sons now, and I'm very loving, and have a grandson who's the love of my life. And listen, I forgive my father. I mean, I didn't have, my dad didn't throw the baseball with me in the backyard and take me to games, and I didn't have that relationship. But I moved on from it. I forgave him, and he had difficulty with his parents and everybody else difficulty. One of the big lessons I've learned, Jody, in life was that to accept responsibility for yourself. I mean, you can go through life, blaming your parents, blaming your teachers, blaming this, blaming that. But at some point, you got to accept responsibility for yourself to kind of, move forward in life in a more positive manner. And that was a tough lesson to learn, to realize, Dennis, you can, but you got to accept yourself here and take responsibility for yourself. You're an adult now. And that was a big lesson I learned, but that was a very important lesson, learn to accept responsibility for yourself and not blame other people for your failures.
Oh, absolutely, because we can get stuck in that cycle and give ourselves the excuse.
Yeah. It's easy. My teacher wasn't good and my parents weren't good, and for me, victimhood, and got to accept responsibility for yourself and become an adult and be responsible for doing something about your situation in a positive manner. And that also makes you feel good knowing you're taking care of yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're setting an example for those who see you and know that you're there and you're friends with people and your kids and all of that. You are, people look up to you and they want to, you're the example. And so if you're blaming everybody else, they're going to follow. So in this case, you're setting a great example. I mean, your story and the fact that you're sharing it, no matter what age, is just so important because people need to hear these types of things because they need to feel connected too. Pam 10 is a leader in IT enterprise solutions and staffing. They are driven to transform their clients' business performances. They do this every day by providing their clients with the best services and products like BizLego, an online community platform, and Colear, a unique learning management system. They also transform the lives of women and children through their associated nonprofits, SheTech, which supports women in and joining the technology field, and Softkin, support organization for kids in need. Pam 10, technology for social good. Go to pam10.com for more information. One of the things I want to go back to, and I wrote down here, which really is going to stick with me personally from this, is it's okay to need me. And I think that that's a really important thing. It is okay to need to talk to someone else. It is okay to
Yeah.
feel that way. And so thank you for normalizing that, because I think that's so important.
Yeah, I'll never forget when he said it's okay to need me. And like, here I am, like 50 some years old. I was like, it is, it's okay. Because I was like, it was not okay to me. I was embarrassed. I mean, I would be terrified going to see my psychoanalyst and think that someone that I knew would be in the waiting room. It was like a secret I kept. It was, you know what, really, it was, you talked about earlier, a shame. And one of the things, the reason I wrote the book was I was ashamed. I kept this a secret. I sort of reflected upon who I was. I really was. It was a horrible feeling to feel, ashamed that I was abused. It was horrible.
Yeah. And we blame, a lot of times blame ourselves, right? I mean, when you're in
Of
those
course, yeah,
situations.
we do end up blaming ourselves and be punishing ourselves. So, but it was very difficult. Yeah, it was tough, very tough.
How did it feel to write the book? And my follow-up will be, how did it feel to see it on a shelf?
A couple of things. Uh, I, I enjoyed writing the book. There was a couple of times during that period that I had to put it down. It was very difficult emotionally at some point, talking about my family and things like that. It was very difficult. I had, I mean, you know, like Christmas time is usually a happy time for people in my house. I remember, I'll never forget, my father turned to my mother and said, when she gave him a gift, he said, if this is what I think it is, someone's going to get a punch in the mouth. I mean, what a painful, unbelievable experience it was. My father was brutally painful. It was horrible. So when I wrote the book, it was cathartic. I really enjoyed, and certainly, and I always, joke, but I think that, when I had my first book come out, I can't believe it. I'm an author. I said, oh my God, and so, yeah, it's rewarding to know that I told my story. I'm proud of my story, if that's the right word to use here. And I think it inspires other people. And that's why I do a lot of speaking and always open an invitation to be a speaker at a conference or at a college or organization about, life lessons of perseverance and determination of how to overcome hopelessness and faith to having success. So I'm proud to have written the book. I'm glad I did it.
That's awesome. And I'm sure it had to be incredible to see it on a shelf, because that's always the next thing.
It is cool to see it on a shelf. It is very cool to walk in some of the office and see they have my book on their shelf.
Aw, that's awesome. So Dennis, you said you were reading books and you saw that you wanted to make a difference, and you saw how much these books meant to you. So talk to us about your journey to nonprofit.
Yeah, well, I was interested because I was just talking to my son about this. So here I was, if you don't know, I was 24 years old and I was thrown out of my house. I lived in the YMCA and I took a job cleaning bathrooms at a Ramada Inn and Edison. And I eventually got a room in a boarding house. And I was 24 years old, I believe. And I didn't go to my fifth high school and I was embarrassed. It's like, hey, Dennis, is that you cleaning the urinals? And so it was like a divine intervention. I finally had a conversation with myself and I said, Dennis, you may think you're going to be the next, famous writer and author, but if you don't get an education, you're not going anywhere. And so I said, okay, how am I going to get an education? Because I got rejected by schools. So I wrote to every college in New Jersey, all the state schools and public schools. I get into most. So when I went to Rutgers and chose Rutgers, at the beginning, I thought I was going to be a physical therapist, Jody, because I was back then very athletically inclined. I think my ages would say I certainly wouldn't call myself athletically inclined today. But I did the work for 6 months as a volunteer as a physical, but not my work here. And then through counseling and Myers-Briggs test of interest about healthcare. And so I just felt I went into healthcare not at all thinking I'd be the president of some $250 million medical center. I went into healthcare thinking I want to give back and have people healthy. and help other people. I remember having one of my first jobs was at the Howard Johnson's on the Jersey Turnpike. That was my first job. I remember it now. And I was a busboy cleaning the tables. And I remember even waiting behind the counter and feeling sad for a father who came in and just could barely afford orange juice for his son here. So the nonprofit of helping other people was something that really made me feel connected. It made me feel good. I wasn't just making widgets. And then obviously, again, after a successful career, well, a lot of ups and downs in the career. Nothing just was straight line here. I mean, I lost my position at the age of 42, and at 54, things happened at the hospital that decided it was time for me to kind of move on, do something else here. Just was the idea of helping other people. I can't think of anything more important. And so, running a hospital was great, but they're big businesses and they're big ships. They move and change very, very slowly. But the idea of working with the organization that we do with, behavioral health care and children's family services and social impact organizations like Make-A-Wish and Jewish Family Services and all those great organizations, they have an impact on people's lives today. And I do feel, Jody, that the nonprofit community is like the glue. The nonprofit sector is like the glue that keeps the community together. And to me, I've met so many colleagues, and we have mutual friends together. I'm just so proud of the people in it. It's something I just enjoy being part of.
Absolutely. What was the first nonprofit job you had?
I'll never forget it. It was one of the first was an organization at the time called Women's Crisis Services. Mm-hmm. And they were in Huntington County, New Jersey. They dealt with domestic violence, sexual assault. And I remember, never forget this, their board wanted a workshop on fundraising. So I said, okay, not governance, not leadership, no, fundraising. I'll never forget this. And so the board chair owned the restaurant outside the Flemington Courthouse. If your listeners don't know, was famous for the Lindbergh baby case, Brewer Hoffman. And I remember asking the board, and I didn't know anybody on the board. One board member, I think, worked for one of my board members. And I never forget, I asked them if they could tell me your top 2 achievements recently. And it was like dead silence. And the woman said, well, we did our budget on time. And I, with a straight face, I'm like, that's not really much of an achievement. And another woman said, we only spend 6% of our money on fundraising. And I'm thinking to myself, it's gonna be a long night. And finally, a woman in the back of the room says, we do a program that is called PALS, P-A-L-S. I said, what is it? It stands for Peace, an Alternative Learning System. We treat children who've been subjected to sexual assault, domestic violence, so they can have a healthy relationship with surrogate parents, classmates, teachers, maybe biological parents, maybe the parents here. And I said, how do you communicate that to your stakeholders, internal and external? She goes, well, we do a better job internally, but we don't do a good job outside. That's why you're not raising money. So that was fascinating to me. And they eventually, and I saw to them also, you deal with children lots, and that they changed their name, became SAFE, S-A-F-E, capital S in Huntington, Stop Abuse for Everybody. My other client that I just spoke to, the former CEO yesterday, was an organization that's now called Embrace Kids Foundation, a very successful organization raising money to help families with kids with cancer when one parent's got to quit their job and everything. But that was many, many years ago, 15 plus, and they were called at the time the Institute for Children with Cancer and Blood Disorders. And they weren't sure what strategic direction to go. Did they go into research and everything else? And after I met them all, and I said to them, you're not an institute. Institutes are, the corner of New Brunswick, Philadelphia, New York, research, education, provision of care. I said, you're a kids foundation. And they changed the name, became Embrace Kids Foundation. So I don't change a lot of names, but I've done that here. So, I mean, I don't know, it's a few hundred organizations I've worked with around the country, but those were 2 that stuck out to me really well, things like that.
So you started DCM, how long ago?
And I started as a consultant in my company in 2005. Back then, it was called Strategic Partners for Nonprofits, LSC, which is pretty much me. And then Michelle Hickey joined me. And then in 2007, we became Dennis C. Miller Associates, which is the legal name. And then again, it was just pretty much me and Michelle until about 2008. I had other colleagues at the time, were associates. But then in 2018, I brought on, Joe Duffy, a friend for years, who was the former president of Catholic Charities. And then before you know it, Greg Nielsen from Kentucky, and then Alan Weisberg, the former chief lawyer for J&J, and then Susan Hastrom from the Ford Foundation, and Yvonne Stiles from the West Coast, and then, Jim McQuirk from New York, and just, keep building a team here. And so it's, we've just grown tremendously, and we're still growing. We now have a, New York, New Jersey office. We have an office in the Southeast in Kentucky. We have an office in the West Coast. So, and we're opening up an office soon in Mountain West. So we're just, I dealt with that this morning. So we've grown quite a bit, and it's amazing. It's a long run, wonderful run.
It's incredible, where your story started, where our conversation started. And I think that's what I love about stories like this, is that for those who are out there who think they're not smart enough, they're not good enough, they don't have enough, there are people out there that can help you, and there are people that have done it before you, and that's what's, I think, so important. Do you want to add to that, Dennis?
Yeah, listen, again, it goes back to, I don't want to say it like loving yourself, but you have to, it's hard to love yourself when you're alone. It goes back to something you asked me earlier, Jody. I think we all need to feel we have a friend. And unfortunately, a lot of people in some pretty destructive relationships. So having a mentor as a friend is really important here. But there's a couple other things too, though. I tell people, you just can't say, I want to change my life and think it's going to change by itself. You got to outwork everybody. You got to work hard. There's no black magic pill here, okay? One of the things that I had to learn was that, depression wasn't a character flaw. It was a result of life trauma, loss, and biochemical issues in the brain. And that I had to learn, even though I didn't feel that way, that asking for help with depression and anxiety is actually a sign of strength and health, not weakness.
That's right.
So and that it was very treatable here. I think clearly I had to learn also the importance of emotional intelligence. Now, I joke a lot with people. It's true. My IQ is not high. I can guarantee you that. And the reason I know that is because if I watch Jeopardy with my wife, she can kick my butt, and I don't know how they get these answers. If it's not U.S. cities or sports, I have no idea what they're talking about here. But I did know that emotional life, emotional intelligence was the key to my personal growth and happiness. And it enabled me to build strong relations with people, success at work, achieve career success and personal goals. And here's something that I've learned too, is that I've met a lot of successful people who are not happy, but I rarely have met a happy person who's not successful. Mm-hmm. And so happiness is a goal, and what will make you happy, and usually making happy is have a connection with someone. I did learn, this was a lesson. I remember when I realized all of a sudden, I used to be, I was Mr. Miller for years, and I was he's the president, and then, you start to change your life and you realize, it's not your title anymore. So it's like, who am I? And I don't know if it's true, but, I think sometimes men more identify with their title than women do. I think I've had that experience anyway, but I realized who I wasn't, based upon my wealth or the size of my home and all those things, and had big homes and, made a lot of money. But it was really, how was I treating my wife and my kids, my friends and my neighbors? How was I treating people? How was I as a person? And I realized that is how I began to measure myself. And that became important. A few other things that, here was a kid that, if I got a D on a test in school, it was like an accomplishment. And so when I went back to school, it was a small achievements of passing a test that built up my self-confidence to take the next one and keep going from there. So those things like that. And also, so that was a big lesson to learn about my self-worth, about self-confidence, about emotional intelligence here, and really never, never giving up. The big difference I've learned between successful people and unsuccessful people isn't intelligence. It's not financial resources. It's not even opportunity. It's the belief that you can make your goals happen. And that is what did it for me. I went from a guy with like no confidence, no nothing, couldn't do a test in school, failed everything, constantly told by my father I was a failure. Just, and the teachers told me I was a failure. I mean, I literally in 7th grade had my teacher make me carry my desk and books in a Catholic school down to the supply closet, across from the head nun, who put me into the supply closet and said, okay, smart, now teach yourself. Now, I'm sure it was a handful of, talking out loud and not paying attention because of the trauma in my life. And then when the secretary walked into the room, there was secretaries back then, and she put the light on, and she's just some little skinny kid. I was skinny at the time. Said, "What the hell is this guy doing here?" But I learned as I went through life and got the professional help I needed. And there's no way on this earth I could have achieved anything without getting the professional help I needed. I didn't have it. And so all those things about believe you can make it happen. So today, I believe I can make anything happen. And I say that to other people here. So we're just quickly, I won't say to the client, we're doing a search for a CEO. And I asked the current COO, was she planning to apply for the job? And she said, no. Now, normally we'd just let her go. You don't have to be the CEO, it's fine. But as my colleague and I spoke to her, I detected that the reason she wasn't throwing her hat in the ring, she didn't have the confidence. And I realized for a lot of young people and for a lot of women, particularly African-American women, women of disadvantaged communities, etc., they didn't have that. And we had a chat with her, and I'm so happy she's thrown her hat in the ring, and she got a great chance of getting a job. And so confidence is crucial. So I've just learned so much over the years, and I hope in my work that I do can impart these life lessons to everybody else, that you can be happy.
That was so well said. Thank you. That was incredible. And I am with you in my belief that if one person believes in you more than you can believe in yourself in that moment, because you don't have it, it can launch you. It's helped me. Honestly, in almost every aspect of my life, when I wasn't in belief of myself, somebody else came along, held my hand and said, you got this. Somehow I got to the other side.
Well, I'm sorry, I gotta say this because my wife will always ask me, did you mention the G? So let me tell you this. The person who's had the biggest influence in my life is my wife, Gladys. Now, we've been married 41 years, but let me give you a little background. So we call her G-Lo. And people ask me, how did you call her G-Lo? So my oldest son, about 20 years ago, when he was a teenager, was a very successful songwriter, lead guitarist for a punk rock band called Senses Fail. They toured the world. They were on Jimmy Kimmel, Conan O'Brien. They're all over the place. And so he came back from a party one day that his publicist invited him to, and said, "Mom, I met J-Lo's mother and J-Lo's sister, and they're from the Bronx, and you're from the Bronx, Mom." So I said, "Well, they got J-Lo, we got G-Lo." And she says, "Don't call me G-Lo. I don't like that name." Well, it stuck. So my wife has been, there's no doubt about it, has been the biggest thing in my life to have someone that became my best friend, I can talk to, and trust me, she's very comfortable being right in my face and telling me what I need to do different. She's good at that. And so I don't think I would have achieved any level of happiness without knowing I had her in my life, and I want to make sure everybody knows that. It's very important to me. So that relationship is crucial. I mean, 41 years is a long time, and we met, and it's interesting. I met her and got engaged in 3 months and married in 6 months.
Sometimes it works that way. Sometimes when it's quick, it works out great. Other times, it all depends. You were very lucky.
Me I was rushing it. I was pushing it. And my mother, this is going too fast. I'm like, sit back, Mom. I got this one. It's like, I got this one.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I'm so happy to hear that that worked out and that you've had people along the way that have believed in you so that you moved forward, and the work that you're doing is incredible. But I have to ask you this question before we go. I just have a few more questions, and I think it's important because of the nonprofit work that you do.
Yeah.
There's nonprofits out there right now, small, large, mid-size. Advice that you have for them in this day and age when there are so many challenges, and I'm sure there's tons of advice, but what's the one thing that you could share that you think could help someone?
Number one, they need to be able to articulate and communicate the positive impact they're having for those they serve. It's not enough to exist. It's not enough to tell people your size, how many programs. You need to communicate the impact you're having on people's lives. And the more you can have those you serve tell your story to their eyes, the better off you are, whether they're telling the story through your website, through your galas here. But it is crucial. I can't tell you how many people they tell me we got 8 programs, we got locations, we do this, we do that. But it doesn't mean anything. Tell me the impact you're having, and have a child, having a mom, a father, family, somebody tell about the impact that your organization has had upon you. That to me is crucial. Number 2, I would tell you that along the line, everybody's certainly seeking, dollars and donors and philanthropy. But yes, people give. The number one reason they give because someone asked them. It's amazing. I mean, I pray to God a lot, but you got to ask someone. Yes, they give to someone they trust and respect. And yes, they want to make a difference in the world, the community. But there's 2 things that's vital to know in the world of philanthropy for nonprofits. People give to success, not to distress. So go back to that story I told you when I asked the client about what their top 2 achievements were, and they told me their budget and this and that. But then they told me they do a program called PALS, and I said, that's what? And the impact, you got to communicate the impact you're having and not be bashful about that. The other thing is that people give to needs of those you serve, not your organizational needs. I think the other thing too is for nonprofit leadership is to it's a phenomenal opportunity to be a thought leader, to have an impact upon your community directly here. And so those are some of the things that I think is important. And also, more importantly too, that it's required in most states, but in New Jersey, it's required for people on the Board of Education to get board training. There's no real requirement for people who serve, the millions of people who serve on nonprofit boards to get any training here. You got to have a training program for nonprofits so they understand the role you want them to play, the responsibility, expectations, and so it moves away from just all in favor, say aye, that you can engage them. And one last thing I would tell everybody to do, I have what's called the 50% rule, Judy, had 3 Judys. Jody, 3 things is at every board meeting, have a prepared question that you're going to engage the entire board and leadership team in on something like this. Yes, we're going to have our committee reports. Yes, we're going to give our CEO update. Yes, we're going to talk about our gal, whatever here. But have a question, something like this. Okay, today we're going to talk about what is the impact we're having in our community? What is the value we're providing to our community? What's our image in the community? Have the discussions and make sure that everybody is engaged in a conversation here. You want the board to feel connected to you, not just sitting in the room all in favor, say aye here. And I think people, that would be my advice to the nonprofits is the most, is tell your story, communicate the impact, and engage people in your organization. That's what I think.
I love what you just said, because I have sat in many a board meeting, and a lot of times, like, okay, you ask the question, so who do you know who could, and everybody gets quiet. I love what you say. It's like, ask everybody, so how do you feel we're making an impact? What do you see us as in the community? And get that feedback from them individually, I think is so important.
And here's something else. So in one of my books, I wrote about a typical day in the life of a development committee. So like the day in the life that the Beatles wrote. And I said, okay, the chair of the development starts off, talks about, who we're going to honor at a gala. And then everybody's, well, we honored him last year, his wife last year, and who we going to honor? Who's going to chair our golf outing? Can we make any money on our wine tasting event? And then, okay, Everybody was asked to give the list of prospects for major gifts. Has anybody submitted anybody? It gets really quiet, and you wonder why. And so we need to move away. But understand, it is painful. Even if you're the president of the bank or the head of sales of a big company, it doesn't mean you understand fundraising. And it's very uncomfortable for most people. So here's what I tell people. I don't want my board members asking people for money. I want them to commit to me this. Would you, and giving you a minimum of 3, 5 be great, but 3 people, individuals, a family, a company, or a foundation, 3 people, or any three organizations that you will help me cultivate a relationship with in a year. Don't ask for any money. Just help me introduction, get that. If you have that, and you've got 10 people on the board, now your development officer has 30 potential names. That's what I want to, and don't want you asking for money, because most board members will ask for too little and or accept too little. And the biggest fear people have is, well, if I ask them, they might ask me and I want to give. And don't make it a transaction. If you believe in your mission, you believe in the work, you believe in the impact, it's not personal. It's about asking people to invest in your success is the best advice I can give anybody. Ask about investing in your success. Is this something you think you can invest in? And that's what I would tell people all the time. It works.
It does work. And that is great, because you should always have your top 50 list of who you'd like to meet and then see who knows them in the room, and they just have to make the connection. I totally agree with you 100%. It's that simple. It doesn't have to be that very difficult. Last 2 questions. One is, with people, you see a lot of resumes, they come through your desk consistently. You have, you're a consultant to help people find executives in major roles for nonprofit, large or small nonprofit organizations. In the resumes, what are you looking for? Is there some, because right now we've got a lot of openings. So if they're going to put things in that resume, what should it be?
Yeah, 2 things. I want them very succinctly to put their, some of the key strategic achievements they have in a real quick 1-paragraph profile of their things as being a leader, communicator, things like that. I want them, to have where they can quantify things. I like a combination of a chronological resume that says, in 2008, in 2014, in 2018, in 2021, these are my jobs. But I like some functional aspects of not just, don't fill it in with all the things you're responsible for. Talk about the things that you've achieved and the difference you made. That's important to me. And clearly your name and the contact information, a phone number, an email address, make sure it's very clear. Make sure there's no typos. It's really important. If someone sees a resume full of typos, they think that's, look at. So that's important for that kind of resume. And I'll never forget, I had a woman, so it was just, she so succinctly, 2 pages or less, not 12 pages, 6 pages, 3 pages, 2 pages, please, or less, period.
Exactly. That sounds good, and not too hard. Definitely not too hard. So, Dennis, you've done such incredible work, and you're continuing to do amazing work. You're growing, and which is amazing, in the amount of areas that you're covering and people you're working with. But what is the footprint you're creating right now that you want to leave behind?
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good question. I haven't really thought about that, Jody, honestly, about what I'm behind, because I still enjoy what I do here. But I think at the end of the day, if there was something I wanted to leave behind, was that I cared, and caring is important, and caring makes a difference in the world. We look at what's going on these days in the world with, Ukraine and Russia. It's just heartbreaking. I think everybody needs a helping hand. I think caring. So what I leave behind is that caring for others is a phenomenal experience, and makes the world a better place, makes people better life. And at the end of the day, it's just, be caring is, and I hope that people say, you know what, he cared. That's at the end of the day, I said that I hope Dennis cared. He was a caring guy. That's what I hope people say.
Wow, I think you're already there with that. We can totally feel that in all that you shared today. I so appreciate you sharing your vulnerability and your story. Where can people find you who want to work with you or have you go out and speak?
Yeah. Well, 2 ways. I mean, we have, DennisCMiller.com. You can find me DennisCMiller.com or DCM-associates.com. And my paid speaking business is moppinfloorstheco.com. But just, go to either one of the websites. Best thing is to call me, 201-956-1810. Happy to be a speaker all over the country. But get a hold of me through that, and we'll be right. And my email is the same thing, Dennis@DCMAssociates.com or Dennis@moppinfloorstheco.com. Either one.
Wow. Well, they have a lot of ways they can get to you. That nobody can say that they don't know how to get to you now. That's awesome.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So I'm just Google. But here's what you got to do. You got to use my middle initial C. So if you Google me on LinkedIn, Dennis C. Miller. I get asked a lot, as you can imagine. Are you the real Dennis Miller? And I tell people, hey, I am funny to him. I am funny to him.
You are funny.
I played football. He only did it on Monday night, but he didn't play the game. And I'm a little older than him, so I think his mother gave him my name. So I am the original. So it's Dennis C. Miller, and I'm available on LinkedIn. And reach out to me on LinkedIn and anything like that. Get a hold of me any way you want.
Oh, thank you, Dennis. I really appreciated your time today. I hope you'll come back. I'm sure there's so many things we didn't cover.
Jody, I'd love to come back. I thank you for the opportunity, and I appreciate everything that you do with change makers and all the work you do with NJBIA and all my good friends there, and particularly our mutual friend, Sir Fred Wozniak, and all that stuff here. I love Fred, and I'm happy to do anything with you and all the people at NJBIA and change makers. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Fred. Fred is our mutual friend, and he's very beloved in the community. So a nice shout out to him. And Dennis, again, thank you so much for everything that you do. We'll have you back on again. Everybody, please check out. It is, I just want to get this right. It's Moppin Floors to CEO. I should have remembered that easy. That's very easy. Moppin Floors to CEO.
Moppin apostrophe. There's no G. Moppin apostrophe. Moppin Floors to CEO. I think that I've had a lot of people obviously bought me the book, and a lot of people told me they can't put it down. Reads like a thriller, and at the same time, it has a lot of funny aspects to it too. So I think they'll enjoy it.
And I'm sure we will, and it'll wind up behind me. All of my guests who have books go behind me, so I'm gonna have to need a much bigger shelf. So Dennis, thank you so much. And I'm gonna say what I always say at the end of every podcast. Today is the day. You cannot go back to yesterday, and you do not yet own tomorrow. So what small or large step are you going to take today to get yourself closer to your goal? Dennis C. Miller, have a great day. I'm so glad that you could be a part of today's podcast, and have a great week, everyone. Bye, Dennis.
Thank you, Jody. I appreciate it.